Welcome everybody to Microsoft Unboxed, episode 15. I'm your host today, Kareem Anderson. I'm joined by
David Allen, glad you guys are here. We're recording this on a Friday, so happy Friday to everybody.
yeah, we're actually recording this on a Friday this time around. For those of you, a little how the sausage is made. We thought we were recording, we weren't, so now we actually are. So we're glad that you could actually join us, and we'll give you a quick rundown of what we're talking about today. We'll be talking about YouTube cracking down on advertiser blockers, not advertisers, which I wish they would. We'll be talking about Microsoft's new AI Explorer feature, which will be pushing the spec requirements for Windows users up a bit more to perhaps exclude a few more Windows users, unfortunately. We'll also be talking about Ralph, and give me that last name again. You had it right.
Garone is how I pronounce that.
Ralph Garone, leaving Microsoft. You might not know the name. I didn't know the name until I wrote about it and reported on it. But he is the guy behind Microsoft's design. Essentially, he's Panos Panay and Steve Sinofsky's right hand man. He's leaving after 17 years of service for Microsoft. We're getting into what he might be doing afterwards. We'll be talking about Microsoft dabbling in deepfakes again with their new Vasa One AI tool, which can create talking faces from still photos. Dangerous stuff we're getting into. We'll also be talking about Microsoft Store getting an update, which makes it a little bit faster. I don't know if it adds any other new features, but the animations look really nice. And we'll be talking about Microsoft's OpenAI partnership, potentially dodging EU of an official EU investigation, which is probably a big sigh of relief to Microsoft and a big groan coming from Microsoft lawyers right now who are looking for something to do this summer. With that being said, let's get into it. Let's tell everybody what our first story is, please.
Well, I'm going to jump in there and get on this YouTube thing because this YouTube thing kind of interests me. We're out there in a world where a lot of people want things for free. And when you want things for free on the internet, guess what? You have to pay for advertising. So with that being said, YouTube has again stepped out and said, look, if you want ad blockers, please turn them off. That's basically, what they're saying. And they're going to force you to now turn them off. Mainly the third party ad blockers because the API has been retuned from Google and YouTube to say, hey, if we don't authorize communications, then guess what? You're going to see buffering issues. You may not be able to play your video at all because our creators have got to be able to make their money, folks. YouTube has got to get their cut. And while I understand that at times the ads versus the content, the ratio of playtime is a little bit off. Maybe if Google would publish, and this may be out there somewhere, if they would publish what the revenue is and what split it takes to get everybody's revenue numbers where it's supposed to be, people might be a little more forgiving. Now, YouTube does say, hey, it's 14.99 a month or 13.99 a month. I can't remember. There's a combo deal in there with YouTube Music. You know, Google says, sure, you can pay for it and we will remove your ads. I get that. Maybe some people don't want to. But at the end of the day, we have to remember there are people out there making a living off of this content creation thing, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Facebook, doesn't matter. We've got to allow ads on some level, or those revenue streams will dry up and we can all go back to paying our satellite cable guy because some of us, myself included, use YouTube as a replacement for everyday TV. So you've got to eat it on one end or the other. You're just going to have to decide, are you going to pay for the subscription to turn off the ads or put up with the ads a little bit?
As the cable guy, I'm going to do an impersonation. I knew you'd come crawling back. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm all for what you said. I don't really have too much more to add. I will note that I think YouTube is going to run into a Microsoft issue where they're going to do something uh, which is ostensibly a good thing for creators, but they're going to message it poorly and it's going to backfire. And I say that by uh, the note that you had that users will start to see buffering issues and other things going on. And unlike the banner that YouTube usually or Google usually has, where it's saying like, hey, if you're using YouTube, it works best with Chrome, or download Chrome and make Chrome your default. They're very good at messaging. Use Chrome. I don't think it's gonna be very good messaging saying like, hey, the reason why you're experiencing this is because we need to pay the people you're watching content from. They need to, if they're going to enact this, say, hey, the reason why, or just say like, hey, starting at whatever date, anybody using a third-party browser is going to experience buffering, things like that. And we're doing this because we need to pay our content creators. That's all you have to say. And I think people understand that. But if you're, Joe Schmo, or maybe your child, or maybe a friend of someone, set up your browser to say, hey, you know what? You don't pay for YouTube, but we put some ad blockers on here. You'll never see another ad again. And now all of a sudden you're having a bad experience at YouTube. They're going to blame Google. They're going to say Google's messing with my experience, and I don't understand it. YouTube sucks now. And I think that's going to maybe perhaps be the prevailing thing. Or even people who put the ad blockers on themselves, unless they go down to the little button that says, hey, you're experiencing stuff, they're going to either say my Wi-Fi sucks. They're going to go to their carrier, their broadband provider, and say what's going on. My YouTube is garbage, and they're going to scratch their head going like, we're seeing all the ups that you paid for and all the downs that you paid for. We don't understand, and it's going to be this disconnect. So hopefully they message this whole thing better, so that again we do get people paid who create things for us, even though we're not necessarily paying for the subscription. Or maybe they have a marketing team that's worked on the language to say, hey, why not get this to help pay these people, and you also get our shitty podcast app as well.
Don't even get me started on the podcasting.
Don't get me. I'm the podcast. I love podcasting. They've ruined it, but we'll move on. We'll move on, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking next about Microsoft's new AI Explorer feature and what this means. I titled the podcast "Microsoft Rides Arm into the Future," and it's no more evident than the new AI Explorer feature, which has been again rumored, not officially acknowledged by Microsoft, but we are expecting some acknowledgement come build time. And I say that it's, we expect it build time is because I believe Alvacor is his name. Officially, the book is closed on Twitter /X or whatever. Put up a post where he or they sleuth through Windows code in the latest build, which details specifications to run this new AI Explorer feature. And what I think we wrote about the Explorer feature. What it's intended to do is basically be a timeline of your device of all actions, content, data that's been on the device, so that you can use natural language, to use Copilot perhaps, or whatever version of this AI machine learning led software does, to put together or search your entire device, and it'll put together things. If you were to use the word like bananas, search for all the things that have bananas. So if you had a sticky note where you wrote, your grocery list down and it had bananas on it, or if you wrote, for whatever reason, an article about bananas, those will all come up. If you have items in your Excel about, purchases, and you're doing your monthly invoice and all the things that you paid for in the month or whatever, all that kind of stuff will pop up because it's all related to that. And that's how powerful the search is supposed to be. But it's going to be on device. And in order to be on device and be run on device, the minimum specs for it is 16 gigabytes of memory, which again, I write in my piece that aren't standard. Like Apple selling an 8 gigabyte device, and people are, upset about that. 225 gigs of total space. Now, it doesn't need to be available, but it needs to be, it doesn't need to be open space. It just needs to be the total space of a device. And again, there are devices being sold 125 gigabyte storages normally. So that's another issue. And here's the two kickers. It has to be powered by an ARM64 CPU. And Microsoft specifically points out in this string that it's listing the new Snapdragon X Elite NPU, which I believe has a shelf name HWIDQ0D0A as the chip. So this is probably the first version of those chips coming out. That's what you'll need to run this thing. Bare minimum. Those are the minimum specs. So if you have a device that doesn't meet any of those now, you're not going to be running this in the fall when this is supposed to be rolled out, or maybe spring of next year. Either way, that's your new device. Your new device you bought this year. If you bought it in the first quarter of 2024, you're already going to be outdated whenever this rolls around. What are your thoughts on this?
We've seen this before, and I'm old. I'm an old guy. My buddy here is not much younger than myself. Um, we have seen several computing changes and generations. We've seen Windows 3.1 to Windows 95. We've seen 95 ME. We've seen Windows Me to Windows 2000, and then we went into the Windows 7, Windows 10, and now Windows 11. And as we have gone through this, computing has changed. We went from LPT ports and COM ports to USB ports to Thunderbolt ports. And back in the day, when the printer interface changed from your typical LPT port to USB port, people screamed for a while. Hey, I don't have this fancy USB port on my computer. I've still got my old Canon whatever or Brother whatever, and I want my LPT port back. Then, as people started cycling their devices out, they realized, hey, this USB thing kind of works a little better. And we kind of have done away with the legacy port since. And I think we're going to see something similar here. I think consumers are going to be ticked off. They're going to want the feature, and you're going to say, hey, this computer I bought 6 months ago, a year ago, doesn't have these features because it doesn't meet the specs. Well, guess what? We're at that point where technology is making another move. We're going down another side road. We're going down this AI road. We're going down this ARM CPU road, and we've got to get there. And in order to do that and get those experiences, you're eventually going to have to buy the hardware. Now, is anybody telling you you've got to run out and buy the hardware, the day it comes out to be able to do your task? No. It's going to be a feature thing. If you want the feature, you've got to have the hardware. I get it. Businesses aren't going to be happy. Consumers aren't going to be happy. But each time we have had a leap in technology throughout the history of Windows, the OEMs have got to get fed. They've got to make the hardware to put it on their books. Microsoft has got to make the software to advance technology. So it goes hand in hand. We've got to pay for it. I don't like having to replace a 6-month-old computer any more than anybody else to get the features. But that's what it reminds me of, is how we had to replace the printers back in the early 90s, mid 90s, when USB became a thing. I didn't like replacing my little Canon. It was a Canon BJC 210, for those that remember that little thing. I didn't like replacing that thing. Hated it. But once I did it, I was happy I did it. And I think everybody else is going to feel the same way.
Perhaps. What I wanted to note, and I don't know if I made it explicitly clear, is that there was no mention of AMD or Intel in this string of
I
code.
thought about
I
it.
think
Yep.
I think that's the bigger issue, aside from the fact that you're going to need to buy a new device that has 16 gigabytes uh, of RAM or 225 gigabytes of storage. It's the processor. It's going to be, you're switching from regular Windows to Windows on ARM now, and we're all got our fingers crossed that Windows on ARM is finally ready, and that the new Snapdragon X Elite, will deliver the same level of performance that we have come to know and love, similar to Intel. But those are two unqualified aspirations right now. And the fact that they're putting this big feature, which requires a lot of investment up front, behind Windows on ARM paywall, that I think is the bigger the bigger nod here. That's the bigger takeaway. What are your thoughts on that?
Same thing Apple did, isn't it, to some degree? I mean, when they dumped Intel, they went, the M1 series. I'm going to call it, the ARM chip because they are based on ARM architecture. I think Apple did the same thing. I think Microsoft is kind of doing the same thing, which is going to make OEM providers be more supportive of this new Snapdragon Elite series CPU. And as we talked about, I believe it was last week, I think Intel and AMD will start making moves to improve their NPUs and other things to say, hey, you can do this on our devices. Well, I don't think Intel's going to be left out. I know the 8000 series of the AMD CPUs is starting to have some of the NPU features in it with some of the things that I have read and seen. So for now, Microsoft is going to tout the idea that Windows on ARM is finally here. We have waited for it. We have waited peacefully. They are going to say that we compete with Apple, or they're going to word it in such a way that we're a little bit better than Apple, and that's up for the consumer to figure out.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we're going. I think that's where we'll be.
Dang it. I was expecting more outrage. You're being too level headed. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is our man, longtime Surface designer, has announced retirement. I'll let you say his name again so I don't mess it up.
Ralph Garone is how I'm choosing to say it, and if Ralph was to see this podcast and we have totally butchered his name, if he would let us know, that would
And
be
it was
great.
on you. It was on you.
Okay, I'll take responsibility for butchering his name if I did.
Yeah. So, what do you want to say about that?
Um,
What are we looking at?
Ralph was the designer of basically all of the Surface products. So it leaves people to wonder. After 17 years, Ralph announced his retirement on LinkedIn. And he kind of hinted at the idea that he might be looking to go somewhere else, start his own company. Did not really say, but the problem is, and the concern, at least for me when I read this, we've lost Panos Panay recently. Now we're losing Ralph. We have had the restructuring of the Windows and Surface teams. And I will throw in there something we don't have on the podcast. Google also did something similar this week when they merged the Android team and the hardware team over at Google. So there's a lot of software and hardware merging going on in the industry right now. But where does this leave Surface? We have mentioned this before when we thought Surface had issues. Surface is losing some of their main, I'm going to say founders, developers, the creative minds, the people that pushed it forward. I'm not as concerned about Surface as I was a year ago this time, a little less. We didn't get Surface announcements and Panos Panay was leaving because we know these ARM CPUs are coming. We know that the ARM version of the Surface Pro 10 and the new Surface laptop, we know that's coming. But where does that leave the future now that they have lost Ralph and we've lost Panos? Where do we go from here?
It's a good question. I I just want to note for those who want a little bit of context about our boy Ralph. He, I think he got his start working for Volkswagen in Germany. He is also a student of, I forget the name of the minimalist designer from that era in Germany. But I think one of his first products for Microsoft was actually the Microsoft uh, Arc mouse, the one that you fold essentially,
Remember that?
and it is then powered up. That kind of fits inside of your hand. It's an amazing mouse. I actually use one currently. And then he moved on to the Surface devices, as you mentioned. He has a hand in almost all of them, from the Surface Laptop Studio to the Surface Book to the Surface Duo. I don't know if his credits include the Surface Neo, but if you've seen the Duo, It's just a bigger version of the of that. He also did, I think I mean, he's well known for obviously the Surface Pro. I say all this to say that I think the Surface team has a very solid foundation. And again, he is the designer, one of the designers. I mean, he works with the team, so he's taught other people, and I think they'll move forward with their knowledge to help kind of build the next versions of these things. But as far as the two-on-one with a hinge, I don't think there's much more you can carve out of that. I think, to this day, I think a lot of devices are still playing catch up to that design. They've all tried to come at it with their own versions of some origami folding things, some magnetic backs, they've all done their own version of it without the hinge itself. Some people have included the hinge, and I don't think you've have mastered that beyond that design. I don't think you're going to make anything better than that Surface Pro design for a tablet 2-1 type computer. And the same thing for the Surface laptop. I mean, it is an ultrabook through and through. Apple essentially said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to get rid of our own wedge design, the thing that launched all the ultrabooks back 11 years ago, and we're just going to do a basic clamshell laptop where we round off the edges, make it a little bit thinner, but it's unimaginative, relatively speaking, compared to what they did with the iPad Air." So I think the Surface team's going to be fine. I don't think we're going to get any crazy Surface laptop studios anymore, like any leaps ahead like that. I don't think they're going to be playing around in the smartphone market to that degree anymore. So I don't think we're going to need Ralph or Panos in order to pitch those things. They're just going to refine their products and probably weigh a lot on the software. Now, where we might see some design ingenuity and some creativity is some of these new designers pair up with the Xbox team, and you have your PC handheld version, new smaller device thing where Microsoft is saying, "Hey, we're just going to instead of creating our console, we're going to create our own version of the Switch where we let it be a PC that runs all these devices powerful enough." Something that we know very well are PCs and Windows versus perhaps the Xbox, and that's where we'll get our next perhaps design innovations from. But as far as the Surface team is concerned, I think we're going to have our clamshells that are going to we're going to be seeing them come out with OLED screens, more rounded displays, probably a thinner chassis, more ports, that kind of stuff is going to just keep going on and on. I don't think we're going to be seeing our next leap and like, hey, here's a new version of a hinge that we're going to work with. I think they've given up on that.
I agree with you, and something if our viewers will allow me to get off this interstate, get on this little side road here for just a minute. When this guy Ralph left, something I thought about was when Johnny Ive left Apple. Johnny Ive was
He's also a minimalist.
yeah, but he was a minimalist, but he also had a designer's mind. That is, the best way I know to put it. And since Johnny left, we haven't really seen a lot of design innovation from Apple. It's been change the corners here, change the corners there, maybe drop a little bezel here, drop a little bezel there. And it's been pretty much a rip and duplicate. But I saw something this week, and this is as far as I'm going to go with this. When Ralph announced his retirement the very next day, I saw something from a little company called Minisforum. If you've not heard of Minisforum, they make miniature PCs. They're an overseas-based company, and they came out with a 3-in-1 Windows tablet. And I'm looking at this thing, and it's very Surface-like, and it followed what you said there with a magnetic type folding hinge that folds down from the top instead of up from the bottom like we're used to with the Surface devices. And it's AMD powered and uses a similar AMD setup as the gaming handhelds do. And some of the early reviews show it, running games and doing things that the Surface Pro lineup cannot yet do. So I was kind of putting this together. We've got a company out there, Minis Forum, that works on a limited budget, does not have the power of Microsoft, and most people haven't heard of Minis Forum unless you're in the industry, unfortunately. So now that Panos has left Microsoft, Ralph has left Microsoft, to your point, we're not going to see the big design changes, I don't think, for a while. Maybe this opens the door for other companies that we haven't heard of, such as a mini forum, to say, hey, now this is our take on how to do this, because somebody's going to come up with the next design for a laptop, phone, tablet, and say, hey, this is how you do it. And then somebody from Microsoft picks up on that. Here's our take. Lenovo picks up on that. Here's our take. And without Microsoft and Apple necessarily having new designs, this is the opportunity for the smaller company to say, hey, we produce this one off product. We don't have the budget you do to have 5 or 6 different models of this product. This is our one off product. And Microsoft or Apple or whoever gets a hold of it, and we take our next leap in product design.
Yeah, we'll put a button on that. You guys let us know what your thoughts are. Is Microsoft in for a dire future for hardware, or is this just a big nothing burger? And I mean, not to say that Ralph's 17 years of dedication and influence don't mean very much, but I think, like I said, I think they've built them solid bones going forward. We're going to move on to Microsoft's deepfake potential disaster part two. And I say that because they have a VASA-1 AI tool. I don't know if it's shorthand for VASA, but that's what I'll say for now. And it's a new framework that can create realistic looking talking faces using just a picture and a voice clip. What it ends up doing is the AI tool will synchronize lip movements with the audio with relatively pretty good accuracy. And the virtual characters are capable of showing various facial expressions that will then match with the context of what is being said to the best of its ability. Again, these aren't a one for one. There, you can. It has that uncanny valley, deep fake ish AI kind of presence to it, but it is pretty impressive. If you've seen the clip or video of it, if not, I suggest you type in VASA One and on YouTube. Watch the advertisement for a quick minute, then watch that. But it's one of the most polished versions of this type of technology we've seen to date. Like I said, it can't fool everyone. And I believe a Microsoft spokesperson said, through extensive experiments, including evaluation on a set of new metrics, we show that our method significantly outperforms previous models along with various dimensions comprehensively. It paves the way for real-time engagements with lifelike avatars that emulate human conversational behaviors. Again, if the Microsoft research team acknowledged that the technology could easily be used for impersonating humans, and this is why I said it's a deepfake disaster in the making, because they've already had, I believe, a Taylor Swift issue back in the day, and I say back in the day, I mean like 2 months ago, where there was a spread of deepfakes using AI prompts in order to create them that were used using Copilot, unfortunately. And so this seems like this has the same sort of potential where they, less of a prompt, and now you just use a still photo, and you can use, whatever interview footage or audio that you have of her, or you have a voice actor, or you use the AI to produce a voice recording of her saying stuff she didn't say, paired with this new technology, and you got yourself, another version of a deepfake that goes around with Copilot and all the new security features they put up in order to prevent that version. So again, I don't know if this is available for use. This is just the platform, virtual platform right now, but I'm assuming they're going to, release this for as a consumer product. What are your thoughts on this?
This bugs me, and I'm sorry to be a little jumpy like that. But stuff like this, it really bugs me because we saw with the Taylor Swift thing where what happens when things fall into the wrong hands. And I get that technology is wanting to push boundaries and AI is wanting to do things. But, I've seen, we're in an election year. I've seen some reports where AI has been used to fake phone calls as well. And, we've seen the Taylor Swift thing. And I think this just takes it a step too far. It's nice to show off what we can do. It's cool.
Mhm.
I enjoy seeing what we can do. But some things just need to stay in the lab. I'm going to say it. Some things just need to stay in the lab because there are hackers, there are impersonators out there. Okay, I have seen, such as the photo you have on the screen. I have seen this photo. Let me go back and see what I can come up with to do some damage, to make things challenging for people. Thank you for Microsoft for showing that we can do this. I appreciate our AI advancements. I am that guy that if you go back 6 or 7 podcasts, I was a little bit on the fence about AI. We were just talking about it off mic. I now use Copilot more than anything else, and we have the Copilot keys on our keyboard. I'm finding myself using them. Fantastic. This stuff, no, get it away, keep it in the lab. I don't want it.
To Microsoft's credit, they say they have no plans to make this VASA 1 AI model available to the public. Quote, until we are certain that the technology will be used responsibly and in accordance with proper regulations.
That's the
Translated,
problem.
until we can figure out a way to make some money off of this, we're going to keep it in our back pocket for now. And so hopefully the financial model still is elusive to them and we can hold off and stave off on this for a little bit because I am in agreement with you. They do mention that, obviously, I'm being, perhaps I would speak for myself, not for you, but I'm being narrow minded in my use cases and I'm being very cynical about the worst case scenario of this being used. But, to what they're saying, this technology can be used for educational purposes, equity, improving accessibility for individuals with communication challenges. So if you're autistic, maybe this, or if you're a parent of an autistic child, this may be a better way to teach them than to have an actual person in front of them. If they have spatial, difficulties for whatnot. This is supposed to offer companionship, therapeutic support as well. I mean, this may be a way to, I don't know, provide a visual assistance if your therapy, say if your therapist is traveling though, and they can do a pre-recorded session with you. I don't know. There are things that I am not capable of imagining at the moment that this could probably be beneficial for, which is why they're probably researching it. But like I said, I've seen dark mirror. I've seen people who are like, I'm going to use this photo to bring a picture of my mom back to life, and it may be more than you bargained for, or your dad, or lost child, because you can create these kind of things. I don't know if it's necessarily the best thing to do, but again, I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak for myself, and as of right now, I have no use for it. So keep it on the shelf, Microsoft.
Yes, please. I get that each time technology advances, there's good reasons, there's good uses, but you can't always depend on everybody to use it with the utmost respect and good
Agreed.
uses. It just doesn't happen.
Definitely, there are a lot of bad apples. A lot of bad. We have some bad trees around. With that being said, we're going to move on to the next one. Maybe something a little happier. The Microsoft Store getting a bit of a speed boost. Um, what do you? I think this is the story you brought up. So what do you want to
Well,
talk about?
I look for stuff like this because I am a big fan of software being optimized as much as possible, and I'm a big Microsoft Store user, especially over the last couple of years because it has gotten better. It's gotten richer in its content. So this week, some of the Windows insiders got their hands on a brand new build. It is build number 22403, and this version does not contain any new features. It is a significant Microsoft Store improvement, though. You can see that there was some tweets mentioned, and I do not have those tweets in front of me. I'm sorry, folks. That is on me, but one of the Microsoft Store developers did put out on Twitter, X, whatever you would like to call it, that this build was out there. Things have improved. I do have this build on one of my PCs as a Windows Insider. I can say that the Microsoft Store is quite a bit faster. And what is nice and was mentioned in the tweet some of the inner pages when you're working inside of something in the store, such as photos and content for each app. That does load quite a bit quicker. Now, for some people, great, the Microsoft Store is a little bit faster, but if you are a user of the Microsoft Store, you will notice that it fits better with Windows. It doesn't feel like it's the stepchild that is a little bit lagging behind. So, way to go for the Microsoft Store team. I hope to see future enhancements of the Microsoft Store.
Yeah, it's our buddy from Windows Phone fame, Rudy Hune,
Thank you, Rudy.
is the one who tweets. We will not forget his sacrifices development for the Windows Phone universe. I think he says about 40% faster, which is no small feat. We also should mention too, for those of you who are new to Windows or youngins, this is coming from Windows 8 Microsoft Store. This is the same code base. This is the same thing. So if you're looking at this saying, all right, well, this is okay. This is nice. They've done a decent job. You got to remember we've come a long way from what the Windows Store was initially envisioned as and came out as for Windows 8. And so I want to your point, David, I want to thank the team for the constant work on it, even though it hasn't been all appreciated or an easy process. I do appreciate where we've landed now and the small tweaks about speed and animation, fluidity, the fact that you can hover over now selections and start to install from that exact moment are much appreciated. So keep working at it, guys. You can always make things better, but I do acknowledge that this is leaps and bounds ahead of where we were at in Windows 8, the first iteration of the store in Windows 10, which was basically a holdover from Windows 8, where the search was atrocious. Search is getting better in this thing. The layout was, it didn't use the economy of space very well. The animations were bad. If it loaded, you were lucky that we've kind of, like I said, good job, guys. Good job. I just wanted to say that. The last thing we'll be talking about is Microsoft OpenAI partnership, kind of skating under the radar for the first time in Microsoft's recent history with the EU. Microsoft will reportedly avoid a formal investigation from the European Union Commission in its multi-billion partnership with OpenAI. The information comes from two separate reports in Bloomberg or Reuters, citing sources familiar with the matter. Back in January, the European Commission announced that it was investigating Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI to determine whether it should be considered as an acquisition that should go through usual regulatory processes. Again, we had mentioned this right around that same time when they were starting to look into it, and this was also happening, I think, at the close, the roundup of Microsoft's acquisition, regulatory acquisition rounds with the UK and the EU as well. So this is just another thing that they were going to have to kind of deal with. And I had mentioned at the time that because it's a partnership, it's going to be a little trickier for regulators to kind of get their hands around this. And I'm saying that they don't need to, and that it shouldn't somehow be looked into and maybe have some provisions set in place to prevent an eventual acquisition. But because it's a partnership, even though, and it's a multi-billion-dollar one, it's going to be harder for them to say, hey, you can't do that. Bloomberg reports that the EU regulators have concluded that Microsoft's $13 billion investment in OpenAI didn't result in a takeover of the company, despite, and I'm adding this part, that Microsoft, I believe, has 51% of the stock market shares, the shares in this. And I think the way that the contract is structured is that until OpenAI can pay back that initial $10 billion investment, Microsoft will retain those, which allows them to kind of, call some shots within the company, at least the for-profit version of the company. Because again, it's a nonprofit and a for-profit version. And then once they pay it back, then the shares will start to be dispersed amongst a consortium of other investors who are still currently investing in OpenAI as well. Microsoft isn't the only one, but they are the largest ones so far. What are your thoughts on this?
It doesn't surprise me. It seems like everything Microsoft does these days gets tick somebody off, whether it's cloud or whether it's an investment, whether it's a merger, whether we bought something, whether we sold something. You know, everybody's wanting a piece of the pie right now, and everybody's kind of taking shots. So we've seen the Activision Blizzard merger go through, and so that kind of perked everybody's systems up a little bit. Go, hey, well, that they got that through, so what else might they get through? So when you're in your office and you've got a stack of papers and you go through this stack of papers week after week, maybe it's your financial paperwork, maybe it's your productivity paperwork, and you go through it week after week and you continue to do it, and then suddenly somebody points out, hey, do you realize you're paying this guy over here the same amount as me for less productivity? Okay, that guy's sheet gets pulled. Once that guy's sheet gets pulled, everybody else's gets checked too. And I think that's what you see going on here. Everybody's kind of checking into what Microsoft is up to. I do think, in terms of AI, the investment will be paid back. The partnership will remain the same. But like we talked about off mic, I see these companies diverging their interests sooner than the 10-year partnership. Copilot has come a long way just in the last 6 months. OpenAI has come a long way, and as you mentioned, we'll have to wait and see what the new version of GPT brings us. So it's a good day to poke at AI. It's a good day to poke at Microsoft. When you're leading the pack, when you're doing well, what's the old thing in sports? You're always wearing the target on your back. And I think right now, Microsoft has a little bit of a target on their back, and when they go out and make business decisions, they're kind of sharing that target with the people they make business decisions with. It's good to see Microsoft in this position. They haven't been here in quite some time.
Yeah. To your point, I believe Microsoft also partnered with another multi-year partnership with the French company Mistral AI, which is I wouldn't say the French equivalent of OpenAI, but they are one of the bigger players in the area, in the region. And I believe the EU said they would investigate that agreement as well. So we'll see what they come to. Now, it also should be noted that the EU is different from the UK. The UK, I
Yes.
believe, also said they're going to be looking into this. And the UK tends to poke at Microsoft a bit more than the EU when it comes to large deals or acquisitions. So they might find something that the EU doesn't have a problem with. I'm not saying that it isn't there, but like I'd mentioned, the details of the contract is basically 10 years, initially 10 billion, with the control of the shares of the company, allowing them to, I guess it's sort of called the shots, but they don't own the company, and they won't be owning the company because after, as you said, the 10-year, they can divest that partnership and go in different directions. Microsoft is currently working on their own small language models that I believe they're going to start building into their own versions of Windows and start partnering with their uh, chip makers to kind of have these on board, which is another way that they're going to kind of move away from perhaps the use cases that are presented from ChatGPT itself, no matter what the models are. Again, they're partnering with Mistral and some other, regionally bound areas so that they don't have to deal with the transfer storing or server kind of issues across international lines or whatnot. So I think that's another thing that they're going to be doing. With all that being said, it should be interesting to see, you know, how Microsoft navigates AI compared to Google's, homegrown in-house version that they're doing. Whether or not it was speedier for them to buy themselves about 10 years with, partnering with the biggest model at the time, and then where that leads them. Would it have been better for them to start, kind of at the zero line like Google did with Gemini and kind of work your way to where you're going to be at and not to even worry about any of this in other countries or regulations or, 10 years down the road where you're left at if OpenAI decides to pull itself or maybe partner with Google or partner with somebody else. And then we'd also mentioned off mic, where does this leave Apple in all of this? We have WWDC coming up. They've already talked about that they will be using Gemini as the basis for their AI models. Now they'll probably do something similar to Microsoft, where they layer some fancy Apple UIs over it and some other Apple use cases within their own ecosystem, but it'll be basically Gemini underneath it. Where do they end up in 10 years after Microsoft, or I guess 8 years now that we're using this partnership? 8 years from now, where is everybody at?
Apple's got to get on the board first. And
Yeah,
I'm gonna take my shots at Apple because I do have in
do
my
it.
I do have my Apple devices in my office, and I do these comparisons often. And to be fair for Apple, I have tried to put Apple back in my workflow, and that's a whole other podcast for a whole other day. But um, their AI work has really got to catch up. Now we know they're going to partnership it, but we also know they're going to brand it in some way. They're not going to come out and give Google the credit of we use Gemini. I don't see Apple doing that. It's going to be Apple AI one now. Come over here to your iCloud plus subscription and pay us another $20 a month, and you can use 5 queries a week. For Apple.
Across all devices, by the way. So be judicious with what you search for. Otherwise, they'll kick you back to Siri.
Exactly, and it's going to
Siri's like the wasteland in Fallout. You don't want to be in the Siri wasteland.
But no, that's the way Apple does things.
No, you're right.
I'm being honest, because we still tease them about their 5 gig storage limits. On the iCloud, the base iCloud plan is 5 gig.
Mhm.
Everybody that's got an iPhone probably has at least 5 gigs of photos in the first year because guess what? The cameras, it's better. It's this, it's that. So people go down snap, 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 snap. Oh, and you got to pay for this. And you got to pay for that. You want a little Apple TV, you got to pay for that. So that's the way Apple does things. It's the way it always does things. So they're going to say this is Apple AI. It's part of this iCloud subscription. This is the limit you use it. It's across all your devices. If you want unlimited or you want so many queries, then you pay more money. Now, I'm not saying that Microsoft doesn't do the same thing eventually with this Copilot that we've got in the bottom right hand corner of our screen, but Microsoft does have more ways to subsidize the cost, and we've discussed this before. Azure helps subsidize the cost, and all of the Microsoft business models subsidize this cost. So it's going to be interesting to see what Apple does with it. And same for Google. Google doesn't have the reach, the infrastructure, the other products to the levels that Microsoft does. So I'm interested to see where all this lands. We've talked about Samsung charging for AI in 2025 in the fine print on the new Samsung Galaxy phone. So I just want somebody, I'm gonna have a little more fun. The Copilot button that's on these new Lenovo laptops. Thank you, Lenovo. I appreciate it. Love it. Use it. Now I want somebody to just start telling me how much is this eventually going to cost me? We're going to get there. Somebody tell me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last time you hear David on our podcast, probably alive. He's asking the wrong questions at the wrong time to the wrong people. So if you believe in conspiracy theories, you say your goodbyes to him right here, right now. With that being said, we want to thank everybody for joining us for another podcast, being here for another goofy week of news, albeit a short one. Where can people find you if you're alive this weekend?
If I'm still alive, folks, David PAJ 1978. That's on Threads and on X, formerly known as Twitter. Jump over there, say hello because I enjoy doing our site each week with our buddy, my buddy here, Kareem. I enjoy these pods. I enjoy talking to you guys. This is what I enjoy doing. So, don't ever hesitate. I know some of you have reached out, and I appreciate that. Don't ever hesitate to put an opinion up there. Now, if you're going to attack, of course, I may or may not respond, but I'm here. I'm open for your input. Give it to me.
He is a person. I did not generate him using Vasa One. Okay, this is the real him.
Are you
You can
sure?
find me. Yeah, I mean, they'll find out when I respond. You can find me at Kareem Anderson on Instagram, on Threads, on LinkedIn. I have started floating back over there because you people have responded to our post on LinkedIn. So I will respond as well in kind with comments or whatnot on LinkedIn. You can also find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter X. If you, like I said, if you want to talk more about tech or whatnot. With that being said, again, we want to thank you. We will see you next week with more Microsoft news. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend, folks.